home to the Royal New Zealand Navy, and I'm grateful for the presence of the Navy here, but of course we've got some announcements that we're going to make ahead of this year's budget in relation to the Defence Force in general. Please let me begin by acknowledging my colleague and friend, the Honourable Simon Watts, in his capacity as member for the North Shore, which of course includes Devonport. I'm delighted to be joined here as well by the Vice Chief of Defence Force, Rear Admiral Matt Williams, who represents Defence, of course, broadly in the way that our announcement relates to Defence across the services, but as a senior naval officer, may be prepared to help me out with any particular questions of a maritime nature. Likewise, Deputy Chief of Navy, thank you for being here, and Sarah Minson, Deputy Secretary of Defence as well. I should acknowledge too my old former colleague and still friend, Commander Paul Matinga, Commanding Officer HMNZS Philomel. In being here today, I'd also like to acknowledge, of course, the men and women of our New Zealand Defence Force, sailors, soldiers and aviators who often serve at great personal sacrifice in defence and indeed protection of New Zealand and our interests. As the Prime Minister stated in his own pre-budget speech, New Zealand stands in a more volatile world, a world that's changing quickly and becoming less predictable. We need to adapt and secure our country's future. On that note, I'll take a leaf out of the book of our military personnel who are always adept at cutting to the chase. So, Budget 2026 contains a $1.58 billion uplift for New Zealand's defence. It is a budget that prioritises maritime security in a global environment that is more fractured than we have seen for some time. For many years, this country's geographic distance has been viewed as a shield from instability. However, we have seen clearly in recent times how quickly conflict can disrupt international shipping routes, affect economies and supply chains across the globe, including, of course, our own. Our oceans are not a barrier to danger, therefore, but a vital national interest that must be actively secured. Budget 2026 invests in the Maritime Fleet Renewal Programme to deliver a modern, combat-capable Navy. It also provides funding for two types of uncrewed systems, commonly referred to as drone systems. This includes uncrewed surface vessels and systems to provide long-duration intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance across the Southwest Pacific, and a polar-capable uncrewed aerial system that can operate from naval vessels to strengthen awareness of our maritime domain. We're also making sure that we maintain and sustain our existing naval fleet while decisions are made for their replacement for the future. That means funding critical maintenance for Anzac-class frigates and HMNZS Canterbury. As you can see behind me, of course, with HMNZS Te Kaha, maintenance of an operational frigate is no small task. Maritime security is not the only defence initiative receiving funding in this budget. Overall, we are providing $880 million in operating funding and $700 million in capital funding, much of it over 4 years, for activities and operations, as well as priority projects identified in the Defence Capability Plan. This includes essential funding to ensure our personnel are supported and equipped for the tasks at hand, whether that be responding to severe weather events, here at home, or deploying alongside partners overseas. That 4-year operating funding total includes $174 million to meet costs increase and to ensure that NZDF personnel and equipment are ready to deploy to protect New Zealand's interests. $120 million to bring Defence Force pay closer to market rates and to meet additional non-discretionary remuneration increases. $20 million to regenerate operational trades and critical support functions, and $6 million for Veterans Affairs to assist the processing of support for applications for veterans. It also includes capital investments in training facilities, digital systems and housing for our people. It was earlier this week that I was pleased to announce progress in the Homes for Families program so that our personnel, where we were at Linton military camp, but also others around New Zealand, are getting on with delivering the secure, safe, warm, dry accommodation that our people and their whānau deserve and expect. In short, this is a budget that delivers essential investment in the ongoing defence of New Zealand and our interests at a time when our people and assets are being called upon more often and in increasingly challenging circumstances. It is also a budget that invests in our economy. As you can see behind me from the work underway on Te Kaha, We have many strong examples of defence and industry working together to keep our critical assets and equipment flying, sailing, driving and operating. Investment in defence translates directly into investment in New Zealand companies through critical construction, maintenance and sustainment contracts. That's of course before we account for the wages that flow through to our employees and our personnel. I'm therefore also pleased to announce that this budget includes $1.5 million in capital funding and $16 million operating funding to begin work on the Technology Accelerator Programme. This pilot is focused on connecting industry with defence to solve particular military challenges, working with our wonderful academics here in New Zealand as well. There's no doubt that Budget 2026 continues to deliver on the government's commitment to invest in a combat-capable defence force. It's one that pulls its weight, will be interoperable with our partners and have enhanced lethality, deterrence and situational awareness. We're committed to doubling defence spending, and across budgets 2025 and now 2026, we've provided $5.8 billion already towards that goal. As a government, we have set a clear strategy and direction for where we are heading. I'm proud to continue that legacy today of national defence, economic security and delivery. And with that, I thank you again and look forward to any questions you may have. Yeah, the frigate replacement program is an aspect of Maritime Fleet Renewal. Is about obviously selecting good, capable replacement for the Anzac class frigates we have. The time frame of that is obviously subject to the negotiation and discussion in that procurement process. But it is clear, to answer your question, that it will be, let's say, roughly speaking, by the mid-2030s that we need to have a continual capability delivered through the frigates in terms of that maritime patrol and other functions that we currently enjoy through those two vessels. Yeah, it's difficult to say with specificity, partly because that depends on the choice of the two different frigates and of course negotiation with those particular suppliers. And of course the number of units that we would end up purchasing. At the same time, other moving parts include the possibility that we will be able to think about ways that we can patrol and effectively control the maritime domain through other choices and platforms and programs within the defence sphere. So I can't be more specific now about the dollar envelope, but including with the acquisitions that we've alluded to in today's budget, of course, all decisions of that nature are subject to a cabinet process and particular business cases would need to be signed off as well.
Where will this funding pull from?
Well, the funding is signalled ultimately in the Defence Capability Plan of 2025, so it's very much as you would expect and has been planned, and we are working towards that goal that we've advertised, so to speak, in the Defence Capability Plan, namely that we will double our defence spending, more or less, to a 2% of GDP goal by the year 2033. So in that sense, it's an investment that's been signalled and is being acted upon.
Just following on from that, over $1.5 billion critics are going through this militarisation and possible crisis. Why put all of this money in now?
Well, there are a couple of different responses I think it's important that we make clearly. One is that there is a connection between economic security and national security. And of course, if we broaden that out to regional security and global security, clearly there are roles that we can play in a way that suits our national interests and ideals as part of our independent foreign policy, I hasten to add, whereby we protect the shipping lines, the supply routes, and of course the airspace that we need for civilian and economic uses of those domains. If you think about the supply chain shock in terms of oil, but other supplies that need to reach New Zealand across the maritime domain, currently with the choke point, particularly in the Middle East, and of course with contest and competition, not to say conflict, of course, in the Indo-Pacific region, it's clear that there's an economic security dimension to the work that we need our Defence Force to continue to be able to do. But I'd also point out, as I alluded to in my opening remarks, that there is an economic growth story to be told here. We were able to partner well with New Zealand entities if not as prime suppliers, and in some cases that will be so, but in any case to have major defence acquisitions involve New Zealand industry in a way that grows our skills, our jobs, and of course our economic growth in regions throughout New Zealand, then that's a positive story that we can tell in terms of capital expenditure, and of course in terms of operational expenditure, with more than 80% of that already flowing through to New Zealanders. There are good stories to tell in the way that we can help stimulate economic growth through the lens of defence.
And you spoke about fuel goods just before. New Zealand has been invited in the past to help play extreme movements. We've just had we're going to get $1.5 billion extension funding. Is that going to steer New Zealand towards that direction or Australia?
Investing in defence allows us options at a government level to make choices that interact, of course, with geopolitical considerations as well. So it's not for me alone, or even in conjunction with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but as a government as a whole and as a nation, we'll make choices that go to our sovereign interests, as well as protecting the international rules-based system for moral as well as international legal reasons. So by having a capable and well-resourced defence force, we'll be able to make choices about what that might look like into the future and into the near future, whether that might involve a role in terms of ensuring those shipping lines can be maintained as free for navigation once some sort of credible and lasting peace solution is obtained. That's again a choice that we'd like to be able to make. Yeah, I think, and I should state clearly if I didn't do before, I think the mid-2030 decade, so mid-2030s, as opposed to the year 2030, is a realistic time frame for us to maintain the operation of our current NZ class fleet of frigates. Try saying that 5 times fast. But in the meantime, obviously we're working hard so that we'll be able to bring forward a decision. Recent progress towards that has been made with the down-selecting or the narrowing of the choice to 2 different options. One, as you quite rightly allude to, is the Mogami class frigates produced by Japan and acquired by Australia. They're in the process of having those constructed and ultimately delivered for our trans-Tasman friend, neighbour and ally. So there is some merit in considering what that would bring as a possibility, but of course at the same time we're also very interested to understand the opportunities afforded by the other frigate type produced out of the UK, known as the Type 31 or Arrowhead frigate. So we haven't made any decisions in that space yet, but we're naturally watching with interest what Australia and others do, and of course the capabilities of the vessels themselves.
Well, what capability does our fleet have that worries you the most?
That worries me?
What capability do we lack in our fleet that worries you the most?
Yeah, I think we have a capable fleet, and of course the greatest asset that our Navy has, along with that of our Army and Air Force, is its people. So we do need to invest in those. So I will say, to answer your question about any concerns that we may have, I would certainly be concerned if, as a government, we weren't thinking about what's needed to raise, train and sustain our next generation of sailors, soldiers and aviators. Of course, clearly we need to look after, well, those who are already in uniform, as well as their defence civilian colleagues, I hasten to add. So we're giving serious thought to what that looks like. We've been investing already in housing and in terms of remuneration and the question of paying conditions more generally. While the detail of that is operational, and I can't be more specific than current negotiations, including with the public sector bargaining for the civilian personnel would allow, certainly I can flag that we're very mindful of the need to ensure that we retain the people that we need to be able to continue to put ships to sea, fly our helicopters and planes, and of course have a continuation of our very proud tradition of Army involvement and presence wherever in the world it may be needed.
I wanted to circle back to your announcement that what sort of surveillance capability, what capabilities are they going to have?
Yeah, I think drones are a concept and equipment that's live and tangible and used already now. It's been talked about for many years that uncrewed systems, including drones in the way that we would understand them, are the way of the future, in fact, are the way of the present. And of course, we need traditional platforms alongside those to help to complement the effects that drones can have. And we'll need to think carefully about the ways that those different platforms and systems can interact. For example, it might be that our naval vessels need to be able to support the deployment of drones offshore from New Zealand. And so we've announced a couple of things specifically in terms of this year's budget, again with the detail to be thrashed out in terms of those negotiations with suppliers as to number and unit specific choices. But in the drone space, we've got unmanned aerial vehicles. Of course, you can have vessels on the surface and subsurface and land-based drones as well. And it's worth noting our defence industry in this country includes a number of excellent manufacturers and suppliers of drone technology already, including those who are doing good work in Eastern Europe, assisting Ukraine to repel the illegal invasion of its sovereign territory by Russia. In terms of this year's budget, we've highlighted specifically that polar-capable aerial drones will be purchased, and we've also signalled that we will obtain more persistent, which is to say long-range, capable vessels that have the ability to conduct intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance missions very far from New Zealand shores in a way that's helpful to our Pacific neighbours as well as, of course, our own situational awareness. I think the possibilities to have combat-capable drones going beyond the intelligence collecting, surveillance and reconnaissance functions is something that we're interested in exploring, and that's will be subject to further decisions by government over the coming months and years, I imagine. But I think it's also worth acknowledging in terms of combat capability, but also just the functionality of these uncrewed systems in general, that with the defence technology investment that we're making, we'll have a range of options available to us to be able to deliver those effects should we make that kind of decision as a government going forward.
Is this spending driven by tensions in Indo-Pacific as well?
I think it's well understood, and has been for a number of years now, but increasingly over time, that we live in a world that is characterised by intense competition and contest and even conflict. Of course, there are other parts of the world in which that is more intense and tangible. In our own region, for the Pacific to be, quite literally an ocean of peace, that's our ambition as a nation, and of course with our realm countries for whom we are responsible in their defence and our other Pacific neighbours and friends. If you think about the Polynesian Islands, but of course our friends and ally in Australia, we're all minded to want to have a peaceful and prosperous, secure region. The challenges of fisheries protection in terms of unregulated or underreported or illegal fishing, of course the trade of drugs, constabulary functions such as maintaining those kinds of presence and deterrence is hugely important. And of course, if you think about the search and rescue function that our Defence Force hold, and then we've got the presence that we have in Antarctica for scientific purposes, as New Zealand Inc., able to be augmented and protected by our Defence Force. So for all those reasons, I think the Indo-Pacific and Asia-Pacific region will be hugely important to us. It's significant, will continue, if anything, in even stronger fashion. So we need to be mindful of the need to be present in a way that's appropriate and to be able to respond to any threats that might hypothetically arise in the future in that part of our world for which we are, responsible and of which we are part.
And is this, the beginning of much larger defence spending increases?
I think what you've seen so far in the last couple of budgets, and with a direct line that one can draw from the Defence Capability Plan through to the defence industry strategy with the economic growth story that we're keen to really bring forward, particularly for the benefit of regional New Zealand and the skills and employment opportunities that Kiwis will have. We think that it's clear a trajectory needs to continue, such that we've brought forward already and can point to in the last couple of budgets. So if we are to increase our defence spending for all the reasons we've been talking about by the year 2032, 2033, then of course it will be important that we continue to spend appropriately, but it also of course carefully in a way that respects the value of the taxpayer dollar. So we'll continue to do that in future budgets, I'm sure. And with that, if there are no further questions, then I'll thank you again to the members of the Fourth Estate for your interest and attention in these important matters. Thank again the members of the New Zealand Defence Force and of course their colleagues at Ministry of Defence. And to you all, senior officials and team, thanks for being here today, as well as my colleague and friend, the Honourable Simon Watts. A good news story for the local area as well, my friend. So with that, thanks very much and have a great day. Cheers.